Welcome back, CSE 235, to part 2 of our EX form, and we're going to focus on the CSS and make our form look nice. So we had the structure and content with HTML in part 1, and in part 2 we're going to focus on basically the layout of it and the colors and the style of it. So we'll do that next, and we'll also focus on the responsiveness as well. So that'll be a little bit of the functionality, but dealing with the data and the input and all that, that'll be the JavaScript. So let's get to work. This is what we have. Doesn't look too good. Now we'll start from the beginning. And I'm not even going to look at my other code that I did when I started it, because I'd like to just kind of see what happens as I go here, because maybe I'll do something different and maybe I'll explore some things. And sometimes that helps me explain it, because if I'm doing something, I have to explain it, right? I can't just be like, well, I did it like that last time. I have to be like, this is why I'm doing it. So hopefully that'll help. So we're going to make sure that we're linking up. We're going to make sure that we're linking up our styles.css, and whether you still have it style or it's styles, that's okay. I called mine styles, so it's linking up. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to do a reset, not a big reset. I'm just going to do, and I have a squeaky chair here. So if you hear that squeaking, that's my chair. I'm going to do a reset. And again, that's a wildcard, and we'll just do margin 0, padding 0, and one I'd like to try is box sizing, and put that at border box. And luckily it's coming up. I don't know if I'd remember that out of my head, but that's the one that basically takes any borders or anything like that and builds it into the width so that you're not going over. So that if you did something that's like 75% and something else is 25%, if something had a border on it, it would go over. You'd have to take that into account. This kind of takes that inside of that. So we'll leave that in there. See if that helps us. It might, since we have a border on our form panel. And we'll start off just with body. We'll put a background color, and we'll just put background color. We could put a light blue and just see how that looks. And if you don't like it, you change it to something else. Move it around. Remember, when you move that around, it'll change to a hex color, and you have to hit enter. So there's the hex number there. And if you want to check it out, refresh it, there it is. Now, that's okay. Could be a little lighter. I should have probably left it lighter, but that's fine. So that's all I'm doing with body right now, unless we were changing something with the font or whatever, but we're not so far. All right, so let's focus on, look at this thing again. This is the form panel, and let's make sure it's called that. So it's called div class form panel. So it's a class, so it would have a dot. It could still have a dash in it. And let's target that. And we'll give that a background color. And we'll put light blue. Why am I putting light blue? So I could keep it in the same family. That way I could keep it here and then kind of make it a deeper blue that's kind of from that color, whether you like it or not. But I'll do that and see how that looks. And let's just see what it looks like so far. Okay, so that goes all the way across. So we don't really have a width. The width is 100% because it's a block element. We don't have any margins, so these things are going right to the edge. But that's okay. That color looks okay. Might be a little dark because of this color, because of the black color. So we might want to go just a little lighter, and I'll do that. And we're going to give it a width, and I'll put 80%. That's what I did last time, just so it doesn't take up the full page, but it also has some nice margin around it. So we'll just give it a width, and then we'll also center it on the page, which we can do by using margin auto. So I'll use margin, and let me just put auto right now. I'm not sure if that'll stay at the top. We'll put margin auto and see what that looks like. Okay, so that's centering that on the page. Now, if we want it to move down, we could put margin on the top and bottom. Now, right now, auto is on all sides, and it doesn't really do anything with the top and bottom. So we could say top and bottom first, and then auto right and left. Remember, that's auto, margin, and right and left. So let's stick with percentages for now. Maybe I didn't do this the first time, but maybe I'll stick with percentages, and I'll just put 10%. We'll see how percentages work. Since I know we'll use M's and things like that, let's just stick with percentages right now and see what happens. And that's quite a bit, but it does center it in the page nicely. It doesn't center it up and down, only when it goes that way, but maybe we'll put a little less. Maybe we'll put 8% for now, or let's try 6. Okay, that's fine for now. It's kind of in the upper third of the page. And we also want some padding in here. So let's stick with percents. Let's go with padding, and we don't want that much. We'll put like 3%. See what that looks like. We'll work with percent still. And when you're using percent, you might say, well, it's percent of what? It's actually percent of the width of the page. So it's more than we want here. So it's probably better off, let's try 2. Okay, that's a little bit better. And it still looks a little wide, but that's okay. You know, it's really wide right now, but it'll get smaller. So we could put more margin on the left and right if we want. We could have 2% up and down, and then we could put a space and put 3% left and right. And that's fine for now. Okay, so we have our form panel, we have our body. Let's target our label and class. Now we have a field class, label class, field class, label class. And our label one will be shorter. So let's put some widths in there and adjust them. So we'll go here and put a label class, and then I'll put a field class. And let's try this. Let's try putting a width of label at like 20% and see what happens, and put this one at 80%. Now we're gonna actually have some probably margin to the right of this, or padding to the right of label, because we want space in there. And actually let's put margin right, and let's do 1%. Let's stick with percents and just see what happens here. And we put 80 down here, so we have 80, 20. Now that should go over, so that should be an issue with that, but let's just see. Now what's happening here is they already grow across the page. Now you're not even seeing what's happening here because these input fields are not getting extended, only the divs, and the divs are going across. Let's just look at something a second. Let's go here and let's go on one of these. And let's see if we could get to one of the labels. Now the labels is 20%. You see how long that is. Let's go to the field. The field goes pretty far across, but they're not on the same plane. They're on different lines right now. I know it's hard to see with the blue. Move this down a little bit. See, there's the label. Here's the actual label 4, but this is the class label. This is the div, and this is the actual input field, but this is the div. So you can see if we need to make that longer, we're going to need to do that to the input. And we could do that. But first, we need to put them side by side and see what happens, because these numbers don't make any difference unless they're side by side. So how do we do that? Well, we float label to the left of field. So let's do that. Let's put float left. So it should always float the label to the left of what's after it. Took a while to do it. Okay, so that's what we have there. Now, that's okay. Now we have an issue here, and because submit, let's just check submit a second. Submit, the label is not really taking up any space because submit's going all the way over there. And let's just check our HTML, make sure that's okay. We have a label for submit, and it has the ID for submit, and that's the button, and the button is in the class field, and the label might be collapsing. Let me just put something in here. Remember how we put nothing in there? Let's put a non-breaking space, which is a ampersand NBSP. Let's just see if that has any effect on it to make sure that that's not collapsing. Okay, that was it. It's nothing in there, it was collapsing, but just putting a space in there, now it's treating it so there's something in there. So we have this issue here. We want to put space between all these, which is fine. And then we can extend these however we want. So let's go back to our styles. Our label has a margin right of 1%. Now, until we align everything to the right, we could do text align in here just to see what it looks like. Text dash align. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, that's kind of what we want. Now 1%, maybe we want a little bit more than that. Maybe we'll put 2% since we're sticking with percents. And all these labels basically need a margin below or margin bottom. So put one here, we'll just say margin bottom, and let's put 2% as well. Let's stick with percents and just see how we go here. We could put M's, we could put pixels, we could put all kinds of things, but let's just go with percents. The nice thing about percents is it makes it more scalable. But let's just see here. Now that gets thrown all over the margin bottom 2%. Now let's see if that problem, that could be a couple problems. It could be our width is now getting thrown off. I'm surprised margin bottom did that. Let's just comment this out. Comment out margin bottom and refresh it. So margin bottom under label pushed everything out. I'm surprised it started pushing things like that. But what if we put the same margin bottom under field? And I actually don't have a semicolon there. I don't think that should be a problem yet, but let me uncomment this and uncomment this and see what's going on here. Like I said, I'm not doing what I did the first time because I want to kind of think this out and see what happens here. Now that's better. So obviously that created a problem because of one not having the margin below. It just didn't have room to go there. Now this looks okay so far. It's kind of what we wanted. If we look at this thing, sort of, colors are a little warmer than we had there. And I don't have the round corner and I don't have the border. That's easy. Go to form panel. We can put border, 2 pix, solid. Doesn't matter what order as long as you put the thickness, the style, and then a color. And I'll put light blue, make this quite a bit darker. I should have hit enter. Shouldn't be a problem. Okay, we have a border on there, and I want it to be a round corner. So what is that? That's also something called border radius. Weird, every once in a while. Although, is there a problem here? I got a red line here. It could be something else somewhere. So, form panel, or is it just because I didn't finish that yet? Oh, it's just because I didn't finish it yet. But border, oh, there it comes up. I just had to start over. Sometimes if you do something, you backspace, it gets messed up. So border radius, and let's just put 1%. We'll stick with percent, see how that works. That doesn't look like very much, so we could probably put 5%. And that doesn't look good. Let me try something here. Maybe it doesn't. I try 12 pixels just to see what it does here. Oh, that looks better. It doesn't like percents. It seems to be doing it odd angles all around, so it doesn't look like it's doing it evenly. So we could try M's, just try 1M. I want to stay away from pixels, which should be around 16 pixels. See how that works. That looks better. Okay, that looks okay, so we'll stick with that. So percents on border radius seem to be a problem. So that's a good start. Remember, we can't extend the divs. We need to extend these things now and make them longer. So let's just try something. Let's go label input field and then a space, and we'll do input. So that will grab all the input fields with that class name or inside that div. Remember, this means inside of. I have to point that out. The inputs do not have a class name of field. They have an input of whatever they are. Or actually, I don't even know if they have a class name. Let's look. They don't have class names. Input. No, they don't have class names. They are inside a div with a class name. So when we target them, we can't use a class name. We're going to use the class name that's the parent and then go to the input. So you could put an arrow here, or you could just do it like that. So field input, and we'll put our curly braces, and let's just put 100%. So maybe that'll fill up whatever's there. Let's just try it. And I didn't put width. I got to put width. Because you could put width with input fields. You could make them a certain number of pixels, whatever you want to do. But let's just see what happens there, what kind of chaos ensues. And there's chaos ensuing. So obviously that's too long. So let's just put it back at 80. The same as what the div is. Okay, that doesn't look right. Did I do that wrong? 80%. So the width isn't really coming out with percent very much. Now, let's just see what's happening here. I'll refresh this again. And let me inspect it. And let's just take a look at what's going on here. There's the margin bottom. I'm looking at, okay, now it's okay. It's okay at 60%. So we'll have to look at this and see what's actually going on here, because we're talking about kind of our whole, the box method here. Again, if we went to 80%, that didn't work out. It's giving us a problem. So there's something there where it's making it too much. We'll have to look at it more. Again, I did it differently last time, but we'll check that out. So let's try 70. Mean to run it, but let's refresh it over here. So 70 seems to be working, and that's okay. Let's see what it looks like scaling down. It's scaling down nicely. Actually, I kind of like that. But I'm just curious of what's going on over here. If that's 80%, I guess curious of where this breaks. All right, so 72 is working. So we'll have to see what's happening here, where things are being measured. And again, that's where percentages are a little hard because it's hard to kind of add up percents. But we'll leave that at 72 right now. The field input, if the field is 80% and then the field input is 72, is this 72 of that, or is it 72 of everything? And we obviously don't want to go over 72 and 20. We don't want to go over 100%. So somewhere we're going over 100%, we got to be careful. So we'll have to check that out. I don't have an answer for you yet. I did it differently last time. That looks pretty good. I mean, this is enough room here. We could make these things bigger. Let's see if we can change the height of those. Do height. Now, I'm not even going to mess around with percentages on the height. I just rather just put like 1M and see what happens here. And that made it smaller, so let's try 2M. And fields are a little bit different, so that looks okay. Maybe a little much, maybe 1.5. Now the labels get a little bit off when you do that, but that looks okay. Now the thing we could do is sometimes adjust the point size, the font size overall. Instead of messing with heights and stuff here, I'll get rid of this. Sometimes just going to, any of these, or even just going to body and putting in something like font size and putting like 110% might kind of make everything a little bit bigger. Now, obviously that's smaller than what it was. That looks okay for now. If you could put padding in here. What if you put padding in here in these inputs? Padding 2M. Just curious, just trying things out here. That worked. That put a little padding inside there, so when you type, you have a little more space inside there. Something to try. Let's check out our button here. Buttons look okay. This button could be bigger. We could probably put some padding on our button. Now let's target our button. Our button has an ID of submit. So, and it's in field, so we could put field dot button under our styles and make a new one. Space button, I'm sorry, I said dot button. So the button inside a field. And let's put some padding. Let's copy this. Let's put padding of 2M in there, 0.2M. That puts a little space around the button. Sometimes you could put more on either side. Do like top and bottom of 2M, and then put 0.4M on either side. That's not bad. And you can color it and do whatever you want, but that looks all right. Let's say we wanted to shorten this. We don't need a zip code so long. What if we wanted to shorten that? Well, how do we target that? That's the zip. Now, how would we find zip? Now, let me move this over so we can look at our code a little better here. We have, here's zip. So if we wanted to target the actual input, it's under field and it's input. Now we'd have to kind of override it. It has an ID of zip. So can we override it? Or do we have to make it a special one? Let's see if we can make an ID and see if it overrides that, or if the element, using the element sometimes may take precedence and you can't override it by just using the ID based on what's closer to it. Sometimes if you look at the code and see what's closer to it, that'll kind of help you out there, but let's try it. So that's zip. That's an ID of zip. So we'll go to styles and we'll say, I'll just copy this. Field input, and let's input with an ID of zip. So input with an ID of zip, and we'll make it like 40%, and we'll see what happens. That worked. It seemed to work okay by targeting that. So I think we're doing okay. It's not that it doesn't work, and it's not that I want these longer. It's that we just want to know, well, we're using percents. Why is it stopping at 70? And where does that need to add up? So we'll figure that out. I think we have most of our CSS done here. We don't have our responsive because it gets to a point and it starts to break. So we'll find a breakpoint here. Actually, we can look where the breakpoint is. And at some point, we'll make it left justified too. So I'm looking at like almost 700 pixels. Could be a nice breakpoint to go to and say, hey, let's make that a little wider and take away some of that. I think I did two different breakpoints. I did a breakpoint maybe here, maybe 720, something like that, where we make it a little wider, maybe 680. We don't want to get too close to it. So in the sixes somewhere, maybe even 600. We'll break it and make it a little bit wider, and then we'll do it on a phone where we take away all that. So we'll take a break here. If you have this set up, things I think are looking okay so far. As far as our CSS, it looks like a form. We could type in it. And before I start the next video, I'll just double check some of my math here and see if I could explain some of that math. I'm doing some of this as I go, so maybe you don't like that. Some people like just following directions and doing it, but sometimes I like to just kind of explore and then kind of learn about, well, what's happening here? And I don't mind doing it. I don't mind getting in here and screwing things up or saying, oh, I did this wrong or whatever. I'd rather have me do that and you learn from it than just setting you off on your own. So hopefully we could learn from some of that. So I'll come back and we'll figure out some of this math, and then we'll do a little bit more and wrap up our CSS. Then we'll jump into our JavaScript. So that's the end of part 2.